Daniel's prophecy in the second half of chapter 8. I kind of mentioned today's prophecy. Depending on the amount of time we have left, after we get through Daniel's, the text that we have in Daniel, we may get into Ezekiel chapter 38. I've had dozens of people come up and ask me about what's happening in Israel and what all that means. At this point, I can't really tell you, but I do want to take you to Ezekiel 38 and show you all the players that are identified in Ezekiel chapter 38. And we may very well see that war that we find in Ezekiel 38. But we don't want to jump ahead of God. I mean, this might be just a precursor. We don't know. But we can see this prophecy given in 38 unfolding to a certain extent. And so we may very well see some really bad stuff. And again, Ezekiel 38, and from what I see in prophecy, it begins the Great Tribulation, and it will end with the War of Armageddon, the Battle of Armageddon. So I personally believe the church will see that first battle that we find in Ezekiel 38, but immediately after that, soon after that, the church will be raptured away, and God will begin to pour out His judgment upon this planet. And His desire is to bring the Jew to repentance and all. And it is not His desire for any to perish, but for all to come to repentance. So, but anyway, that's being said, what we find in Daniel's prophecy at this point are multiple visions, multiple dreams, and with each and every dream, we find a prophecy, and with each and every one of these prophecy, we're getting more and more and more detail. And this is just going to continue on. And the more of these details that are given to us, the more clearly we can see and understand the Antichrist and what he's going to look like and what he's going to do. It's all foretold right here in the book of Daniel. And that's what we're going to be finding this morning as we get into the second half of chapter 8. Up to this point, we've seen, for example, Babylon. Babylon was first seen as that head of gold, and then in the second prophecy that was given, the second vision that was given, Babylon was seen as a lion with eagle's wings. We know that's Babylon because that's still a symbol of Babylon to this day. When I was in Iraq, I seen this symbol everywhere. So that was the first kingdom that, and the prophecy had declared that this was the greatest kingdom. And then we see sort of a decline of value, not necessarily of strength and power, but of value of the following kingdoms. The second was the arms of silver, which represents the Medo-Persian Empire, the Iranians, as they're known today. You had the Medes and the Persians represented by the arms, and then you also had the Medes and the Persian represented the goat or the ram with two horns, one being longer than the other. That would speak of how the Medes would initially be the stronger, but eventually the Persians would be the stronger. And so I skipped one there, didn't I? The Persians were actually represented by a bear. There's actually three for the Persians. The first was the head of gold, and then the bear. That spoke of the Persian strength and power. Because as a great bear, it moved very slowly through the desert, but it had great power. It would totally annihilate anyone that stood in their ways, because we're talking about a 1 million man, 2 million man army. I mean, they just come in one after another. They just kind of one surge after another, and they just totally annihilate their people. But the Medes and the Persians were defeated by what was represented as the belly of brass. This was the Greek Empire. The Greek Empire was also represented by the leopard, because unlike the bear that moved very slowly as it went about conquering, the leopard, one of the fastest creature, if not the fastest creature on planet Earth, moved in very quickly. They could move quickly and more effective logistically, because this army was only about 35,000 people, or 35,000 soldiers. He used guerrilla tactics to annihilate, to destroy that Persian Empire. And of course, then this leopard in the next dream was represented by a goat. By a goat that seemed to be floating across the land, as Daniel observed in this vision. And was it moving or traveling across the land? Because it was moving so quickly, it just seemed to be floating. Well, this goat had a small horn, a single horn that protruded out from it. And this horn was Alexander the Great. And we know this because in our text this morning, it will tell us that this is Alexander the Great. Of course, Alexander the Great was able to go in and to take out the Medes and the Persians, and then he began to rule and reign. And he's considered today, from the world's perspective, as the epitome of leadership. He was a great leader. As Alexander the Great conquered the world, he travels through Jerusalem. The Jewish priests, this is recorded in our history, in biblical or from Jewish history, and we do know that he went into Jerusalem. But as he goes into Jerusalem, he does not destroy the city. And the reason is because the priest went out to meet him and showed him this text. And he was so moved by it, he chose not to destroy Jerusalem. He goes on from Jerusalem, he goes on to Africa, he conquers Africa, he establishes the city Alexandria, and from Alexandria he goes on into Afghanistan, he conquers Afghanistan, and from Afghanistan he goes on into India, and then he's all bummed out because he has nothing else to conquer. From 28 years old until he was 33, he had conquered the world. And after conquering the world, he was just bummed out. He was depressed because he had no more to conquer. But he's in Babylon. He decides that he's going to throw a big old party for his soldiers. They have a party. They do all kinds of raunchy stuff. He walks home drunk. He's in the rain. And he passes out in his home in this wet clothing, and then he develops pneumonia, and 3 days later he dies. But now, out of out of Alexander, there's three. His kingdom is divided into three different ways. It's divided into amongst four of his top generals, and that's what we're going to be looking at this morning. We've seen Alexander, and we contrasted him with Jesus. And the world's vision or view of leadership, and we contrasted that with Jesus. This morning, what we're going to be looking at is another leader who's, as we drill down, as we get deeper into prophecy, this leader is a type of Antichrist. But it gives us the details of Antichrist. I'm jumping way ahead of myself. Let's go ahead and get started here. We're going to be picking up in chapter 8, verse 9. So Alexander the Great has died. His kingdom is divided in four ways, four horns and four leaders, if you will. And out of one of them came forth a rather small horn. The small horn. Which grew exceedingly great toward the south, toward the east, and toward the beautiful land. So we have this small horn coming to power, and he's moving on all directions, but he's specifically focused upon the beautiful land. And this beautiful land is none other than Israel, this land that flows with milk and honey. So he's zoomed in, he's focused upon where Alexander the Great chose not to destroy Jerusalem. This guy's intention is to destroy Jerusalem, to conquer Jerusalem. Maybe he's like, why did you avoid or not rule over Jerusalem? And maybe he's, angry at that. I don't know. Maybe he has some ill feelings about this. But he's focused upon Israel. He's going after Israel. In fact, he despises Israel. And that's what we're about to see here. excuse me. And it grew up to the host of heaven and caused some of the hosts and some of the stars to fall to the earth, and it trampled them down. It even magnified itself to be equal to the commander of the host, and it removed the regular sacrifice from him, and the place of his sanctuary was thrown down. And on account of transgressions, the host will be given over to the horn, along with the regular sacrifice, and it will fling truth to the ground. It kind of reminds us of today, right? You know, flinging truth to the ground, trampling over truth, and will prosper. So, this is exactly what happened in history. There were 4 horns. The 4 horns began to conquer 4 different districts, 4 different regions. But out of this out of the 4 horns come the Seleucid family. And the Seleucid family was basically ruling and reigning over Babylon and Syria, which is interesting because we're beginning to see some development in Babylon and Syria today. Babylon, of course, being Iraq. It was the Babylonians or the Iraqis and the Syrians who attacked America. Of course, they're proxies of Iran, but we were attacked. Americans were attacked. But anyway, that being said, maybe that plays later into our study as we close this out. Just put that in the back of your mind. You know, Babylon or Iraq and Syria. A couple of key players today. And basically, the Seleucid family, out of the I'm mispronouncing the Seleucid family, comes the little horn, what the Bible refers to as the little horn. Now, this little horn is not the little horn we've seen in chapter 7. That little horn comes out of the 10-nation confederation. This little horn comes out of the 4. And he's actually Antioch or Antiochus is how he's actually referred to because he ruled over Antioch. His name is Antiochus. He went by the name of Theos Epiphanes, which means God manifested. He's referred to as Antiochus Epiphanes because he ruled over Antiochus, and it means the shining one. He was shining forth as a ruler. But anyway, he basically is ruling over Babylon and Syria, but because of his hatred toward the Jews, he's going specifically after the Jew. And so the Jews, by the way, didn't call him Antiochus Epiphanes. They called him Antiochus Epiphanes, which actually means insane one. They seen through him. They seen him that he was kind of off his rocker. And of course, he proved to be off his rocker, a bit crazy, if you will. But he liked to declare himself to be God. So he attacks Jerusalem, and as he goes into Jerusalem, he erects a monument of himself, a statue, whatever the case may be, and he declared himself to be God. And then, after declaring himself to be God, he orders for all the historical writings, the holy writings of Israel, to be burned. And then after this, he goes into the temple and he sacrifices a pig upon the altar. He smears blood all over the walls of the temple and then tells the Jews, the priests, to drink the blood. And of course, there was a rebellion as a result of this, of course. And 44,000 Jews was killed as a result of that rebellion. But 1 million Jews would soon die in the months to follow. So this is Antiochus Epiphanes, and we're going to discover a whole lot more about him as we get into chapter 11. But continuing on for this morning. Then I heard a holy one, verse 13. Then I heard a holy one speaking, and another holy one said that the particular one who was speaking, how long will the vision about the regular sacrifice apply? Because, he's basically gone in and make a sacrifice. All other sacrifices have been halted at this point. And it says, while the transgression causes horror, so as to allow both the holy place and the host to be trampled. He said to me, for 2,300 evenings and mornings, 2,300 days, then the holy place will be properly restored. So what's this 2,300 days? Well, Antiochus Epiphanes began his attack and ruled over Israel beginning in September 6, 171 BC. And then, so he begins his attacks, but then he's met with resistance. There was a specific man by the name of Matthias in the city of Modin who says, no, I'm not going to have anything to do with this. You know, just like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, he says, I'm not submitting. I'm just not going to do it. But as a result of that, he was killed. But Matthias had 5 sons. And the oldest of these sons was Judas. And Judas, with guerrilla tactics, begins to attack the troops, the soldiers of Antiochus. And soon he defeats them. Using his guerrilla tactics, he defeats them. This is what began to be known as the revolt of the Maccabees. And so he defeats them, he runs them out of town, and then he goes into the temple, he cleanses the temple of all the defilement, and then they begin to burn candles. But they only have enough candle to burn for one day. And so they begin to pray at this point. And then as they prayed, and they continue to pray, and they continue to pray, and what happened? But one of the other things I forgot to mention here, it would take 8 days in order to make these new candles to burn in the temple. But they had a one-day supply, but they began to pray, and they continued to pray, and they continued to pray. And somehow, miraculously, these candles burned for 8 days. And so this becomes what is known as the Feast of Lights, which is the Feast of Hanukkah, which took place on December 25th, 165 BC. December 26th, 165 BC. That's why they celebrate Hanukkah around that time frame to this day. Well, what does that turn out to be? September 6th, 171 BC until December 26th, 165 BC turns out to be exactly 2,300 days. And of course, this prophecy was given, I can't remember the exact number of years, but somewhere in the neighborhood of 185 years after the prophecy was given. So, continuing on. Actually, it may have been 285 years. I think we're going to be able to do this. When I, Daniel, had seen the vision, I sought to understand it. Behold, standing before me was one who looked like a man. Of course, this is the angel Gabriel. He's actually, and so he's asking for interpretation of this vision. And the angel Gabriel is going to give him specific detail concerning this vision. He said, I sought to understand it, verse 15, and behold, standing before me was one who looked like a man. And I heard the voice of a man between the banks of Ulai, and he called out and said, Gabriel, give this man an understanding of the vision. And so he came near to where I was standing, and when he came, I was frightened and fell on my face. But he said to me, Son of man, understand that the vision pertains to the end, or the time of the end. So we know that this vision worked out concerning Antiochus Epiphanes, but we know that it wasn't necessarily speaking of the Antichrist, because the Antichrist would come out of the 10-nation confederation. So we got this little horn coming out of the Greek Empire, but yet there's a horn that is to come out of the 10-nation confederation. And the angel Gabriel is saying, what you've seen actually pertains to the end of time. So Antiochus Epiphanes becomes a picture, a very detailed picture as we look back into history of exactly what he's going to do, the Antichrist, of what he's going to do in the final days, in the middle of the 7 years of great tribulation. And what does he do? He goes in the temple and he declares himself to be God. And Jesus spoke of this. When you see the abomination of desolation, know that the end is near. And Paul also tells us that he will walk into the temple in 1 Thessalonians, he'll walk in the temple and basically declare himself to be God. And so this is, as we go into this, as we get into chapter 11, we're going to see some very specific details that might apply to those final days, to the end of days. And so, not all of them will apply, but a great deal of them will apply. A great number of them will apply. Just like one of the details that the Antichrist will come out of the 10-nation confederation, but we know that Antiochus Epiphanes didn't come out of the 10-nation confederation, that he came out of the 4 kingdoms that were divided after Alexander the Great. So there are certain things that don't apply, but the picture is what we're looking for. What kind of man this will be. And he's going to be, as far as military strategy, he's going to be an Alexander the Great. As far as oral speaking ability, he's going to be a Ronald Reagan or a Donald Trump. He's going to mesmerize people. And people are going to believe every word that proceeds from his mouth. He's going to have the answer to peace in Israel. This guy's going to be just so unbelievably talented and skilled as far as strategy, as far as speaking ability, as far as intellect. He's going to be phenomenal, as Donald Trump might say. It's going to be, the greatest thing you'd ever seen. It'd be so great. This guy is going to be so great. So what we're told here is that even though we're given certain details, this is a picture that's pointing to the end of days and what the Antichrist will look like. So we're given greater and greater detail as we go through this. Verse 18, now while he was talking with me, I sank into a deep sleep with my face to the ground, but he touched me and made me stand upright. He said, behold, I'm going to let you know what will occur at the final period of the indignation. And it reminds me, the indignation, and we're chapter 9, we're going to get into great detail concerning this. But I'm reminded of what, the prophet Isaiah had said, what the Lord had declared to Isaiah. He says, come now, enter into your rooms until indignation runs its course. It's a picture of the rapture. Come now, enter into your rooms until indignation runs its course. What did Jesus say? Behold, I'm going to prepare a place for you, that where I am, there you may also be. In my Father's house are many mansions, many rooms. Enter into your room until indignation runs its course. And what did John see in Revelation chapter 4? Before the great tribulation began, he heard a voice in heaven said, come up here. And behold, he's seen a door standing open, and a voice like a trumpet saying, come up here. It's a picture of the rapture of the church. Come now. Enter into your rooms until this indignation runs its course. But he says, I'm going to give you specific details concerning this. Verse 19, he said, behold, I'm going to let you know what will occur at the final period of the indignation, for it pertains to the appointed time of the end. And again, chapter 9, great detail. Chapter 11, we're going to get greater detail concerning the Antichrist, pictures. And so, but this guy is going to be so brilliant, so believable, the world is going to believe him. That's what Paul says. There's going to be this deluding influence that will fall upon the world for all that remains. They'll have no other choice but to believe him. And the world will follow this man for at least 3.5 years until he walks in the temple, commits the abomination of desolation, and the Jew finally says, no, you're not our God. You're not our Messiah. And then in the middle of that great tribulation, the final 3.5 years that will remain is going to be supernatural destruction. But in the beginning of it, you're going to see natural destruction. You're going to see asteroids hitting the planet. You're going to see these earthquakes. You're going to see these volcanic eruptions. But then at the other end of this, you see the Antichrist, he becomes the devil incarnate, because he, like Jesus, he dies, but 3 days later he rises again, and he makes the promise of eternal life. Oh, there's so much I could get into concerning this, because we're seeing people talk about these very things, eternal life. Have you ever heard of Yuval Noah Harari? He's talking about this very thing. People having eternal life through AI. It's incredible. But we see all this stuff unfolding, all this stuff developing. But like Jesus, he's going to declare himself to be Messiah, and he's going to rise from the dead, and he's going to promise eternal life to all that remain. But after that, it's going to be demonic activity that's taking place. Demons will come out of the pits of hell and torment men. And men will be crying and begging to die, but they won't be able to die, because these demonic hordes will be tormenting them. The ram which I saw, verse 20, the ram which you saw with the two horns represents the Medes and the Persians, the Medo-Persian Empire. So you got the Medes and the Persians, which today is modern day Iran. The Medes and the Persians are just two separate ethnic groups within that Iranian empire. So you got the Medes and the Persians. It's kind of like today. You got two different ethnic groups. So you got the blacks and the whites, the Medes and the Persians. They were part of one single empire, though. Verse 21, now he gets specific again. He says, the shaggy goat represents the kingdom of Greece, and the large horn that is between his eyes is the first king, Alexander the Great, the first king. So, he's identified the Medes and the Persians, and now he's identified the Greeks specifically. So we can look at each one of these prophecies or these visions going back, and we can see how it's just developed and how it's become more and more detailed. And this is probably the text that the priest took out to meet Alexander the Great. Talked about the Greek Empire and this one horn, this powerful horn. Says, you are that guy. Verse 22, the broken horn and the four horns that rose in its place. Of course, that first horn was broken. Then there's four horns that came to power. And history tells us that Alexander the Great's kingdom was divided among four generals. And so he tells them this, it's going to be broken, and then that kingdom is going to be divided between four generals. So, but these four are not as powerful as the second. Will arise from his nation, although not with his power, not with the power of Alexander the Great. In the latter period of their rule, when the transgressors have run their course, a king will arise, insolent and skilled in intrigue. So this is speaking of the little horn, but it's also speaking of Antichrist in the latter days. His power will be mighty, but not only his own power, but it will not be his own power, and he will destroy an extraordinary degree and prosper and perform his will. He will destroy mighty men and the holy place. So, this Antichrist, when he comes to power, there's going to be all kinds of signs and wonders. He's going to be conquering the world. He's going to prosper. He's going to be magnified. People are going to be in love with him. But his desire is to destroy the Jew, to annihilate the Jew, which has been the devil's intention since the beginning of time. You destroy the Jew, you destroy God's promises. The promises of God to the Jew cannot be fulfilled if the Jews are extinct, if they're wiped out. So, just like with Adolf Hitler, the devil was behind it. The devil was to exterminate the Jew. Of course, out of Adolf Hitler, World War II, the nation was born again in a single day. fulfilling prophecy after prophecy. Ezekiel, Isaiah, Joel, Jesus, destroy. All these prophecies were unfolded. No nation had ever been born in a single day. Most cultures, when another kingdom and it comes in and conquers that culture or that land, their identity is lost within 200 years. The Jews were out of their homeland, away from their temple, away from the worship, away from all that God had promised them for 2,000 years. And then the question was asking the prophets, how can a nation be born in a single day? But yet Israel on May 14th, 1948 was reborn. And just as all the prophecy had foretold, they began to flood back into their homeland. These prophecies, my point is, are real. They're going to happen. And I believe that we can see some of it right now unfolding right before our eyes. It's real. It's coming. It's going to happen. But we can be at peace because of what Jesus has done for us. He's washed us. He's cleansed us. And He's promised us that He's going to take us up as indignation runs its course. He's promised us that He does not judge the righteous among the unrighteous, that He will take the righteous out before He pours out His judgment. We should all be looking up, saying, "Come, Jesus, come, Lord, come quickly, Maranatha." Verse 23, verse 25. And through His shrewdness, He will cause deceit to succeed by His influence. He's deceitful. And as Paul said in Thessalonians, to the Thessalonians, there's going to be this deluding influence. They won't have any other choice but to believe. And I think there's many things that's contributing to this deluding influence today. I mean, it's just like we're told that the Antichrist will rewrite history, rewrite the times, rewrite the laws. And this is something we see happening today. They're trying to erase our history. Because if you know your history, you can better see the future. That's why it's important to be in the book of Daniel, to know the past, to know the history. But there's going to be this deluding influence. So the people are going to be told lie after. And that's another thing that Adolf Hitler had said. If you're going to tell a lie, just tell a big one. Make it a big one, and then just repeat it over and over and over and over again, and people will believe it. And that's what we're being told now. Lie after lie, over and over and over again. It's a deluding influence that's coming from the world powers to deceive us, to control us. And this, I think also another thing, Harari, I mentioned him earlier, he said the best way to control people, the useless people of the world, is to give them drugs and computer games. Set them in front of something to occupy their minds. And we see this happening with all kinds of media, with social media. There's a controlling of the mind. And that's why it's important not to be caught up in what's being said, but seeing what's happening and comparing that to prophecy. Don't be influenced by what's being said. Be influenced by what you see happening and go back to Scripture and compare it to the history of what we already know. Because all this is designed to tell us what is to come. That's what it's about. Verse 25, we'll repeat that verse, and we'll see where we land here. And through His shrewdness, He will cause deceit to succeed by His influence, and He will magnify Himself in His heart. In other words, He's going to claim to be God. He's going to magnify Himself. He will claim to be God. And that's what the Jews and the Muslims are looking for today. We're looking for Jesus. They're looking for the Messiah. They're looking for the Mahdi. And this guy, as we shall learn here, he's going to come in and be a peacemaker. And so what's going to happen is this guy's going to fit the description of both Messiah and the Mahdi, and both Jew and Muslim will find peace. But only for a short period. but there will be peace that comes. And I don't have time to get into all details this morning, but that's what we see happening in Ezekiel 38. What's going to happen is that there's going to be attack from Russia and from the Iranians and from the Syrians. We see all these names, these details in Ezekiel 38. We're going to see all the players, and we'll get into this. We'll get into it a little bit more deeper. Just don't have time to do it this morning. But what's going to happen? All these players are going to come in. They're going to attack Israel. But we're told that the walls, there will be no longer walls around of Israel. Now that could speak of, and I've said this, it could speak of the signs of the times. There's no longer walled cities. I mean, we want to tear down the wall on the southern border right now. But there's no longer a walled city. Jerusalem will no longer be walled, and it's not. But it does have this iron dome to protect herself. So maybe, somehow, some way, this iron dome will be destroyed. And we're told that there's going to be a hook in the jaw of Russia. God is going to place a hook in his mouth and draw him into Jerusalem. And so I'm thinking about the Nord Stream pipeline, which was blown up sometime this last year at this time. So maybe the hook in the jaw, and where Russia is today, is the natural gas reserves and all these other natural resources that Israel has. Maybe this iron dome, I'm saying maybe, we don't know, but maybe this iron dome will be brought down, and then this will be that opportunity for Russia, the Iranians, the Turks, and Libya, which is mentioned here. Maybe that'll be their opportunity to say, okay, now's the time to take her out, to destroy her, and we'll get all the spoil, because Israel is a very rich land with natural resources. And so maybe that will be the deal. And so we will see him come in, and he'll magnify himself to be God. Oh, okay. I said all that to say this. We're getting to this one magnifying himself. I believe at this point, God tells us that basically what's going to happen to the Jew is that, to the armies that attack the Jew. To the north, there's going to be Damascus. Damascus is going to be completely annihilated. We learned this from Isaiah 17 or Zechariah 14. I can't remember one of the two. I'll get these two mixed up. But Damascus is going to be completely annihilated. That's from Isaiah 17. Zechariah 14 tells us their faces are basically going to melt off of their skulls. While they're standing up, they'll just dissolve away, which could speak of, a nuclear blast. We don't know. But we also know there's going to be a great earthquake, and Israel's going to be saved in the midst of this. But I believe out of this is Brian's personal belief here. We don't know this definitively, but after this war in which Israel wins, everybody's going to have to backpedal. But this Mahdi, this Messiah, is going to rise up. He says, I can make peace here. I can make all things right. I'm an incredible leader, and he's got these great communication skills. So he's going to be able to settle this for 3.5 years. And so I think it's going to be the Ezekiel 38, 39 war that's going to bring about the Antichrist. I believe this is where he comes in. And maybe with the earthquakes, maybe with these natural disasters that we find associated, maybe this is when the church goes up into heaven. Because Paul tells us Antichrist will not be revealed until the church is taken up out of the way. Maranatha. Lord, come quickly. I'm ready to go. How about you? In verse 25 goes on to say, and he will destroy many while they are at ease, while they are at peace. He's going to come as a peacemaker initially. We see this in Revelation chapter 6. He rides in on a white horse. He has a bow. He has power, but he doesn't have arrows. He doesn't immediately go to war. But there's going to be 3 nations that will resist him. He'll go to war, get this one nation confederation out of this one world government, which will also be a one world religion, a one world economic system. Does all this sound familiar? Right now, this one world economic system, that's what many of the things we see happening is about. To get rid of the American dollar and to have an electronic transfer of resources, of money. It's what's happening. He will even oppose the Prince of Princes, Jesus. He's going to oppose Jesus, but he will be broken. We see this in the Battle of Armageddon. We have all these nations of the world coming together, a 1,000,000-man army coming out of China, and all of these other nations come together. They've initially come together to battle one another, but the Antichrist, the devil, has a different plan. He wants to destroy Israel. But I also will declare war against Jesus. And at this point, Jesus will miraculously break through from the clouds, and he's going to be riding in on the white horses. But guess what? There's going to be myriads of people, millions upon millions of people that will be following him on white horses. Who are these people? It's you and I to come back and establish his kingdom on earth for 1,000 years. He'll rule and reign on earth for 1,000 years. And then we'll go into a new heaven and a new earth where we shall forever be with him. The vision of, verse 26, the vision of the evenings and the mornings, which has been told, is true, but keep the vision secret. This is Gabriel saying to him. So keep this vision, for it pertains to many days in the future. And then later on in chapter 12, he says, seal up this vision, but in the last days, there's going to be an explosion of information. There's going to be an explosion of knowledge. That's exactly where we are today. All you have to do is Google it. You've got the information right there before you. So this is going to be sealed up. It's not going to be fully known. It's not going to be fully understood until the last days, and still until stuff begins to happen, like what might be happening in Israel today. And then suddenly you're going to be able to take all these puzzle pieces and put them together, and this vision is going to be seen by those of the latter days when you have all this information at hand. Then I, Daniel, verse 27, was exhausted and sick for days. You know, you got the little horn, you got the lion, the tiger, and the bear. Oh my. He's got all these creatures, and this one creature that it can't even be described with an existing creature today, that it had these iron teeth, these bronze claws, and it's like, man, this stuff it doesn't make sense. And I'm seeing what's happening here. And he was sick. He was exhausted. It just wore him out mentally, emotionally, physically. He was just worn out. Then I got up again and carried on the king's business. But I was astounded at the vision, and there was none to explain it. Maybe that's where you're at. You're seeing all this stuff happening, and you're just like sick. I don't get it. I don't understand. You got a little horn. You got 10 horns. You got 10 toes. You got bronze belly. You got all these images and stuff. Then you got the book of Revelation and all of this stuff I just don't get. I don't understand. And basically, all you can do is say, I'm trusting in Jesus, and then go on about the king's business. Just keep on keeping on. Occupy until I return, is what Jesus commands. So maybe you don't get it. Maybe sometimes it makes you a little bit nauseous, but just go on about the king's business.